Welcome to a special edition of Understanding the Science of You, where I guess I'm calling it a special edition because, you know, we're going to go in a different direction, right? I mean, in order for change to occur, then you got to challenge some things, right? And I think that's what a lot of these conversations have led up to, and not led up to, but been all about, right? Is challenging the status quo, challenging what we thought we knew, challenging what we thought we knew about ourselves, challenging what we thought how we thought people would react when we came out as ourselves, and the fear, and then realizing being embraced. Take your pick, right? Um, and so I want to take that. I want to take that. I just want to keep. And I want to challenge. I want to push some boundaries a little bit here. Let's have a little fun, right? Because let's face it, right? If you're listening to me, my guess is it's not because you're looking for the status quo, where you're looking to have some traditional thoughts or ideas reinforced. It's because you're looking for some different thoughts and perspectives, right? Or something along those lines, right? And so this is my first attempt here at going down one of these. And so, with that said, on this episode, I want to focus on productively challenging the status quo, right? Because there's, challenge. When I talk about challenging the status quo, before I think stuff gets taken out of context, because I definitely have, and I say that because I know that I have a very rebellious streak, right? And I'm absolutely, talking about starting a movement to create change. And so, challenging the status quo to me, though, is much more of a mental game than it is a physical game. And challenging the status quo, is just about, and to me is much more powerful to lead by example, to demonstrate what's possible, than it is to talk or to complain or to shout at people. There's no value in that, right? If you want my attention, it's pretty simple. Show me something that I want. Show me a personality trait. Show me a thought process, a philosophy. Show me something of interest, right? And then we can talk. I want to talk about productively challenging the status quo, for the sake of evolution and all, right? And so there's a couple of things beliefs that underpin a lot of what I'm doing here on this podcast, the next subsequent seasons, other work that I'm excited to talk about. And that's that. One is the refusal to believe that this is as good as it gets. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It's just, why do I want to think that anything is as good as it gets around me? Because that means anything else from here on out is downhill. That doesn't sound very fun and exciting to look forward to. No, I always want to believe things can get better, right? And so that's point number one. The second part is that, as technology and AI and everything else starts to take more and more of a forefront, is that I refuse to believe that human potential is inferior to the potential of technology. And so, and also then when I say as good as it gets in this context for this episode, a simple way to think about happiness, right? Because I guess as good as it gets, happiness, I'm kind of making that bridge there, right? So a simple way for me to think about happiness is living a life of self-guided choices while being able to maintain love for self, and others in your surroundings. But how can one fully live a life of self-guided choices if, one, they aren't aware of all the choices available to them? Two, if the system that they're operating within is resulting in rewarding conformity compared to valuing individuality? Or three, if they aren't receiving the accommodations to be their most productive selves, right? And so I believe that the human potential is near limitless, and that AI should be used to enable various forms of individualized accommodations, right? And so I would say that reaching the human potential encompasses science, technology, and spirituality. And, again, in this context, I'm defining spirituality as encompassing our philosophical, mystical, and magical sides. And, I'm also speaking, I think, more to those, and assuming that if you're listening, right, it's because you prefer to be more self-sufficient than dependent on a hierarchical system. Right. And so a foundational item in reaching the human potential is thinking for yourself, being comfortable and confident in your own skin. And so, like anything, what I would suggest that as I challenge the status quo, take what resonates with you, leave what doesn't, because it's not so much about how much you take or what you take, is it as much as it is that it sparks curiosity and opens up new areas of interest in the world or for yourself that you want to explore. All right? So where do we want to start with what we're going to challenge? Well, let's start with what science has or has not proven regarding ESP or abilities beyond the traditional five senses, right? So one of the things that when I look at the tests and other things and, compare this to my own experience and many others that I talk about, and they'll say, well, we couldn't get enough people to validate this. We couldn't get this to happen. We couldn't get, essentially what the challenge becomes is typically about consensus, right? And so I totally understand that approach. The thing that I would the piece of information that I would want to inject into that conversation is to say, look, instead of thinking about, somebody having ESP or the traditional five senses as this uniform abilities of everybody doing the same thing, think about it more as athleticism, right? Where everyone's got their own different unique skills and abilities that fall within the realms of being athletic, right? And let's talk about basketball, right? Is somebody a good basketball player only if they can shoot 3-pointers? Is somebody a good basketball player only if they can dunk a basketball? Is somebody only a good basketball player if they have a high, free throw percentage, right? Or or are they a good basketball player based on how they perform all of those different things, right? And so psychism is the same way, and it is just as individualized, right? And so the way that the tests that are being done, I would say, is very similar to making a decision about how good a basketball player somebody is based on their ability to perform at one position, and then judging everybody else's abilities as a basketball player on that same position as well, right? And so what I would say is, okay, well, wait. So that would be one piece of information. The next piece of information is also to think about it as, well, why does this exist? Well, it exists to help as a guided journey. Many people want to look at AI to create a form of assistant or friend, access to information, kind of go around with them. Well, many people in the spiritual community would describe their relationship with their spirit guides or their higher self, whatever, right? Very, similar to those same things, right? And so that means it's also then for a personalized experience. We wonder and say, okay, well, this gets down the road of, hey, why are we here and things like that. So I'm not going to go too much down that road. But if you do believe that there's an intelligent design, it doesn't necessarily mean it's tied to any religion or whatever else, right? Just that there's intelligence that created and governs and keeps the stuff together, right? Natural laws are an example of that. Then, in order to navigate, one would be provided, self-sufficiency as opposed to having to rely on others, right? And so if one thinks on it as these types of different abilities as a decision that one makes on how they choose to navigate this life experience, well, now when you start to try to understand things from a much more individualized as well as experiential perspective and as well as contextual, now you start to really open up and understand that aspect of humanity much more differently. And I can also tell you, because from my perspective, one of the, I spent 40, what do you call it, 44-ish, 45 years of my life. That if anybody would have told me that I had anything more than the traditional five senses, which I would have told them they're crazy. I don't believe in that stuff. What are you talking about? Get away from me. Literally. Ironically, like in many things I found out, the things that I've swore, no way, crazy, turned out to be some of my biggest truths. And so it turns out one of the ways that I learned how to be at peace with myself was recognizing that I'm actually extremely gifted, sensitive, and things. And so when I didn't know that about myself, it was absolutely information overload constantly. But once I understood those things about myself and how to work with them, etc., then, I was able to now go from information overload to, wow, how amazing and wonderful it is to have all of this information around me and to be able to kind of tap into it when I need to, as opposed to, being drinking from a fire hose. And so why does that matter? Because, I read a stat online, and so if it's online, it's got to be true, which is that 1 in 6 United States citizens now suffers from some form of mental illness. or disorder, something along those lines, up 50% in the last 10 years or 5 years or something like that, right? So is it really that, or is there really a lack of fully understanding the human physiology? I can tell you again, based on my personal experience, and that there definitely comes as a lack of of fully understanding the human physiology. And what's in it, and what really matters isn't so much that one person or that everybody believes the same thing, but what matters is that there's safe spaces within both traditional and non-traditional medical communities to offer healing to those that are reaching out for it, as opposed to judging them. Right? Nobody gets healed by being judged. I don't think it's not a healthy way to seek healing through judgment anyway. All right, not one that I would recommend. Um, and look, and speaking of this, of the approach to mental health, and how everyone is meant to be from the same cookie cutter approach. When I went through understanding myself through the lens as a neurodivergent individual, one of the things that I encountered was this approach, that um, somehow the goal in life was to learn how to assimilate and become quote unquote neurotypical or normal, right? And that seems to be the approach in medicine, and so there are, I won't cover that on this episode. I could do that on just the limiting, on how limiting to society and potential a belief system like that is. And so that's why, that's why I will challenge it. Is anything that places limitations, that says that it says, as humanity we have learned everything we can learn, this is as good as it gets. No, can't buy into that. I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying that this isn't going to be as good as it gets, because I believe in evolution. All right. So this other one I want to touch base on, as I came to learn and understand this, as I first understood myself through the lens of a neurodivergent person, and now I'm also, and now understanding myself, also applying it back in the past when I thought of myself as a neurotypical person that just didn't fit in or didn't understand things, and now as well, looking at myself as a sensitive and gifted individual. And that is this belief that, that the status of evolution, or that all animals and all human species, neurodivergent, desire to or aspire to be a traditional five senses neurotypical experience, where speech is thought of as the valued means of communication. Um, frankly, as the valued means of communication. If you can't communicate verbally, then you are broken, and that's just backwards and wrong, and so against the intelligent design this system. It just saddens my heart. Again, I can't go down that path here. But the next thing I want to challenge is that the Western United States medicine and the way of life is superior to the Eastern ways or the indigenous ways, right? So I think the first thing is that, look, this one size fits all approach or definition of success and happiness as a way of life doesn't apply to all the same, right? And so that's part of respecting differences. And that's also part of learning from differences, right? There are pros and cons to all cultures, right? You know, some would look at this point in time, like, I'm going to go an extreme for the sake of making a point, right? For as much advancement as there has been in technology and medicine and all these other things, right? Look, they also bring with them, some side effects and some symptoms. If we were to take a look at, let's say, our indigenous friends who have chosen to kind of stay away from society, or on their own. I'm talking like really, really remote, by the way. I'm talking like, really remote, living on their own. We don't understand these pharmaceutical problems. We don't understand school shootings. We don't understand all these labels being applied that tell people how they're broken because they don't fit against some chart. of some magical miracle person that we don't know who existed, that these charts were made after, um, that we're all measured against. But and I can also and there's also can say there's a certain happiness and peacefulness as well that those people have when they look in the mirror that many people sitting in nice fancy homes would long for. And likewise, on very hot summer days, I can assure you, indigenous friends would also appreciate air conditioning. Right. So, look, again, the point is about appreciating differences, respecting differences, and respecting why somebody's going through the learning experience that they're going through. Right. Because that's like the beauty of free will and being able to kind of choose your own adventure of how you want to live and learn and experience life. All right. So where are we going from here? Oh, this is definitely one that's been very interesting for me. Is that what I refer to as this human suit, is our total identity, wisdom, and capabilities, right? Right. I think different people, different things things have called it, higher, little self, bigger self, human self, or incarnated self versus total self, or this self versus a higher self, right? You could say, to keep up with technology, one could say that this is you, created as, server based, with what you needed on your brain, but you also have the ability to, tap into the cloud, and that's when things really get, interesting and fun. So, you know, that's one of the things that part of me going through these public changes and is to demonstrate that, look, I wasn't always this way. People will see, right? Like that things are different, and this happened as a result of breaking down. I don't know how to say it for right now. We'll just call it breaking down the filters, the barriers, right between my individual self and my and my higher self, and that has changed everything in my life. And what I can tell you is that I absolutely am happy with what I see in the mirror. And it doesn't require me buying any more stuff. But again, now there's nothing wrong with stuff. I had plenty of stuff and enjoyed plenty of stuff. But what I recognized is that there's much more to my consciousness than me in me being. And you know, I'll talk about dimensions of consciousness for that matter for even a quick second on that one. So if I can understand my dimension of reality, I can understand things things within that dimension of reality. And then let's say I have a friend of mine and I'm close with them, I have empathy, I am able to understand things from their perspective or within their dimension of reality. Well, now I'm technically a multi-dimensional being, right? Because I can understand my dimension of reality, their dimension of reality, which allows me to then create win-win solutions. And so, I would just call, consciousness simply comprehension, right? And until I come up with a better way of describing it for me and what my experience, has been, it's been simply about increasing my comprehension of things. So another one that I want to challenge here is that the use of electronics equates to intelligence or the need to not worry about developing survival instincts. Right? People, I talk about my squirrel friends or my animals that I learn from people. Well, for many reasons, some will laugh, some will have fun. Well, we don't need to worry. Like, I understand if our ancestors need to worry about that stuff, but now we figure out how to build houses, we got AC and refrigeration. What is there to learn from any of these things anymore? Right? And look, and I agree. Like, look, when you're thinking about survival instincts from a purely wilderness standpoint, yeah, that's not so much of a relevant topic anymore. However, when you want to talk about, I guess, I don't know if you want to call it transferable intelligence or survival skills at another level, what I want to talk about is creative problem solve, is developing your own creative problem solving. Look, if we're operating inside of an intelligent design, then that means there's patterns. And so the ability to recognize patterns is part of that navigation and part, of the system. Developing agile or fluid thinking. Right? I think, and by the way, all of these things are also demonstrated, of course, by our animal friends. So you're gonna notice that this theme of, again, understanding and appreciating, love and respecting, because we can relate to what we're similar. So hopefully, you're picking up what I'm putting down on that one. Another one is, right, how to make the most out of our surroundings, right? Like, that's an important one. Well, look, whether that be technical stuff, I mean, look, being resourceful, is a subset of that, right? And so, yes, of course, our animal friends can teach us about that, but there's plenty of, what you want to call them. And I hope you guys recognize the reference to, like, the MacGyvers of the world, right? And the scientists, the people that can learn how to take and create things from your household items and stuff, right? Um, that is absolutely a survival skill and understanding. Also, figuring out how to foster a supportive community. I mean, if social media has taught us anything, that it is a survival skill to foster a supportive community, and it's also a survival skill to have one and need one, right? Um, and also, you look, and an opportunity and threat assessment. One of the things that I definitely, as I was, tapping into the consciousness and trying to understand the animals, and I kept using words like safe, and finally they came back. They're like, look, man, we don't understand safe. We just understand, is it worth the risk or not? And if it's worth the risk, then we do it. And some of us are more risk averse than others, even inside the squirrel community, who's they love the risk reward, right? I mean, that's their game. Even inside, there's different personalities and much more that are more risk averse than others, right? Um, and then the other one is empathy, right? And empathy, and one of the things the reason I'm calling empathy a survival skill is number one of the things that I recognized in order for me to open up my gifts is that empathy was like is a foundational or fundamental item needed for that. And apparently somewhere in my life, because of my sensitivity, I must have flipped it off. Obviously it wasn't conscious that I can aware of, right? But I definitely disconnected myself emotionally, right? As I think probably was evidenced by some comments from some people. And so from Dad, but empathy, in addition to then being able to turn on your one's gifts, which then allows for um, guidance from the universe to better reach you. Empathy also allows for product development, to understand how to create value for people, how to create value into a society, and understand where there is underserved areas and genuine needs, and where people are being marginalized, and are able to then create the accommodations to support to level the playing field. Right. So when you think about a survival skill, I can't think of a greater survival skill than empathy, which then allows everybody to come together, work together, appreciate each other, respect each other. Right? Once you remember that you've walked in somebody else's footsteps, and you were given that grace, it's only fair to give that same grace in return. So, well, let's see here. What else can we challenge here? What does it mean to be human? Well, I've read different things. Speech, right? Well, I highly disagree that speech is what makes somebody human. Sure, again, like, it's a part of it, but it's by no means a defining trait. Number one. Number two, there's plenty of species that communicate audibly. So feelings of compassion, love, and suffering. Again, we see that both amongst humans and animals. And some will say, well, aren't humans just another animal? Yeah, I guess technically. I'm just trying not to offend anybody if somebody's sensitive about that. And others say, what about walking on two legs? No, birds walk on two legs. Quite frankly, birds are, speaking of that, I mean, birds are talk about a remarkable suit and versatile intelligence, right? I mean, they can run, they can jump, they can fly, they can build a house, a summer and a winter house. Some of them without even needing arms, let alone forget about hammers and nails. I mean, like, again, we all have our purposes here on Earth, right? So I'm not saying that humans are meant to, build houses with their mouths by any stretch. Just simply acknowledging that there's different forms of intelligence, and it's important to acknowledge that. So speaking of which, right? So then, what else does it mean then to be human? Does it mean to be conscious? Yeah. All right. Sentient, intelligent, having decision-making faculties. Again, at its simplest form, that ties in with many of our animal friends as well. And so, in its simplest form, then I guess if you break it all down, or if we're all just conscious, sentient, intelligent, decision making entities happen to be wearing so some of us are choosing to wear a human suit, others of us apparently are choosing to wear squirrel suits, and others, and other animal suits. Well, that makes an interesting kind of a conversation now, doesn't it? Huh. And then, by the way, how fun would that be to be able to be like, wow, I want to go jump out my backyard and go, yeah, put on a squirrel suit today. Just saying, right? So, and then let's talk about this one. What does it mean to be a man? You know, that's definitely one that I don't know. All right, and that's sure as heck not for me to say, right? Again, and like anything, right? This is about challenging the status quo and helping people to figure that out for themselves. What I will acknowledge is, like, I definitely thought of myself, or at least when I think back to what do I recall of what I was taught or whatever, it was to be like, be the breadwinner, be the rock, don't show emotion and be a winner. um, and essentially your value is what you can bring home, economically, right? And so that was, and then also that, and then later on in life, I kind of, I developed the thoughts that, that any relationships with women, right? They were supposed to revolve around me, right? And I was extremely selfish. um, right? So and then I've lived that, and then now I've started to live things with very different understandings, right? And so what I would say is, what I have understood is, what does it mean to be a man? I don't know, because first of all, if anytime somebody told me to be manly, here's where I get confused. All right, like I have male anatomy, so I guess it makes me a man. And if a man is doing something, doesn't that make it manly? And so if I'm doing something, but then it's not manly because I'm being told to be manly, I just don't get it. That's so confusing to me. So I don't know what to do with that. And so I'm going to take a different approach of saying, well, what does it mean to be a man, and what have I figured it out about myself, and what would I share is, like, what it means that I'm masculine energy, and it means that I'm feminine energy, and it means that it's up to me to determine how I want to anchor into those and how I want to use into those, and what percentages I want to operate with at any given time, right? And what I recognize, what is important to me, is to understand that there are those both sides to me, and to understand the depth and the richness and the fullness of those various sides, right? And for myself, how I'm still not, for me, all I'm saying as a man is, I know that's just the human suit that I wore, right? I got both masculine and feminine energy in me. I love both equally. Both are equal. And and where was I going with that here? Oh yeah, I love both equally. I think the point is I think is for everybody to try to understand that about themselves, and then also then let's take a step back and say, well, wait a second here, and then if I'm just masculine energy and feminine energy, and then that means that, so you're saying then that some guys could have more masculine energy and then feminine energy. Does that mean masculine and feminine in personality? No, don't confuse those two either, right? Those are different things. Right. But what that does bring up is the important point of saying it's an individualized experience, right? And everybody came wired how they came wanting to be wired to enjoy their experience. And it's really, really, really crappy then when the system tells them that the way that they want to experience it, they're not going to support, or um, or even ridicule, right, or marginalize over. That's what's not cool. And so I think, so look, part of the human experience, right, then is, what does it mean to have a human experience? Look, part of that experience is understanding what you want to be your experience, right? What are those sides of you that you want to lead into during this time? And how do you want to get to know yourself? And just because you do it one way doesn't mean it has to be that way tomorrow or the next day, right? That's part of the whole fun of things, is that it's never set it and forget it, right? And so, I've really learned to, like, for me, I guess, I don't know if this makes sense or not to others, but in a simplified way, that I really just lean into my masculine energy to focus on creating safe spaces. And then I lean into my feminine energy to be able to enjoy and have the most rich experience within those spaces. And so I can say that as I have, leaning into that feminine energy was absolutely essential and critical to, unlocking and understanding, myself and my gifts and things like that. And so it does. And so I do, I guess, where the challenge then is that when there are different disciplines that will say things like, well, I don't want to do that movement because that's sissy. Well, you know what? Me not doing those things because they were sissy prevented me from tapping into all these gifts about myself, right? So, so that's the downside, right? Anyway, I won't go down anymore down that path. Look, and the other thing then if Graham, if what you're saying is it's just a difference of suits, wait a second. Well, you're saying that we're all as intelligent. No, hold on. Yeah, let me back up that buggy before anything. Like, no, what I think is that what's important is to recognize that, look, the concept of, the circle of life is a very simplified way of saying this earth is a beautiful, beautiful attribution model, right? Where there's everything has its cause and effect and everything is tied together. And so therefore, everything has its purpose. Everything has its own set of responsibilities, both to the planet and to the collective consciousness, right? Humanity's responsibilities along the lines of stewardship, both for the planet and for each other, right? And all of that then bleeds into the consciousness. I'm going to touch on consciousness, in a different series here. So hopefully, you'll join me there as well. The last thing I want to challenge is that we have to accept the current state and the current set of choices when we live in a democratic representative government. Not to mention, if we want support from the universe, we need to be specific and concise, right? So here's kind of two different approaches to problem solving to have some fun with it, right? And we think about that. So if we want to lay out there what kind of a future world we want, I think, by the way, if you're also listening, pay attention, you also recognize that the world's going through some changes, right? People talk about manifestation. People just talk about the woo. There's all, we're in a very, very special and wonderful time. And so let's talk. So let's start to. So let's talk about these things. Let's bring some life into it. Let's breathe some life into our dreams and our visions and into a positive future. There's plenty of things that we can focus on to be negative and pessimistic about, but there's also so much that we can be idealistic about too. And whatever we breathe life into is what's going to grow. So let's focus on that idealism here. All right, and let's have a little fun. So let's start with first, let's craft a marketing campaign. And by the way, grab a pen and paper because this is kind of like a do it at home kind of activity for some self-discovery, exploration, and things like that. Or right, is craft a marketing campaign to attract visitors from the cosmos. Right. So instead of like, hey, come to Disneyland into Florida, it's like, hey, come to Earth. Here's what we have to offer. And look, as a united species, as a globe, as a planet, what do we want to be proud of? What is it that we want people to come and enjoy? What is it that we want to showcase? Right? And then, and have some fun with it. Then the next one to throw out there is what rights, access, and accommodations are all humans entitled to? Right? Last time I checked, and again, I'm sure somebody probably throw this out there at me is actually, but anyway, I think generally speaking, I'm not aware of any origin stories that talk about how humanity created the earth. And so, nor then am I also aware that they created themselves to be above others. So that means somehow some people ended up on they're a bunch of renters that somehow have taken some that say some and some families or governments or whatever have seemed to take this position from renters to owners. Right, and not all of these owners believe that all humans are entitled to be treated humanely. And look, as a species, as a race, look, people can only get away with what we allow. It's that simple. Does it mean it is simple to change? Absolutely not. Right, and that's but it starts by saying that at some point in time, we gotta say enough is enough. We're tired of living in fear, and we're tired of different people getting treated like shit. And no, that doesn't mean open borders, by the way, and everybody coming everywhere. Absolutely not. That's definitely not what I propose. I absolutely do believe in borders, and I do believe that if that there should be safe places for everybody to kind of have their own living and learning environments and experiences based on their different belief system, things like that, right? I don't believe that everybody being forced to accept everything in conformity or to have stuff shoved down the throat is the answer either, right? And so, if we were starting from scratch, what would we want every human to be able to have access to? What would level the playing field for everybody? Right. And I'm not talking about that shit people aren't allowed to get ahead. Absolutely. If somebody creates a greater contribution and value than others, why shouldn't they get rewarded in whatever that reward system is? Right. It's part of the motivation. Right. And so hopefully some stuff has resonated. Hopefully, I shared in the beginning that one of, like in the beginning of the podcast of what to expect, that one of my goals was to have you go, I never thought about things like that. Interesting. Well, hopefully this episode we've touched on some of that stuff. But most importantly, what I really hope is that you take some time and define and enjoy a new human experience for yourself. Have a fantastic and awesome week.